joining us for today's Executive Management Professionals webinar entitled Training Managers to be Managers. I'm Michael Pope, the President of Safety Technologies and a Vice Chair for the Executive Management Professionals Group. First, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping notes before we get started. All callers will be muted for the duration of the call. Please be sure to use your question or chat log to submit questions, and all questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. Additionally, a recording of the webinar will be available in the EMP Resource Library on esaweb.org. I would like to thank Courtney Berg for presenting today's webinar. Courtney is a national speaker, published author, and an entrepreneur HR consultant. She is involved in the community as a governor-appointed member of the Colorado Small Business Council, a member of the Colorado Small Business Development Center Advisory Board, and a certified Small Business Development Center consultant. Courtney has also been a Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce Chamber Champion and a Denver Business Journal Outstanding Woman nominee. She has a Senior Professional and Human Resources certification from the HR Institute Certification Institute and an SHRM Senior Certified Professional certification from the Society of HR Management. Courtney was featured in the How to Conduct Annual Employee Reviews and Inc. magazine. She is a Colorado native and has a BS in Business Administration with an emphasis in management from the University of Northern Colorado. Courtney, I will now turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it. I want to thank Shannon and Michael and the entire ESA organization for the opportunity to speak with you today. I thought maybe I would take just a couple of minutes to fix my computer screen. Hold on one moment. There's always technical difficulties, right? Excuse me one moment. Okay. All right. Excuse us, we tested this all out, but something happened when we started recording. So just a moment here. All right, there we go. Thank you for your patience. Again, I just wanted to thank Shannon, Michael, and the ESA organization for the opportunity to speak with you today. I thought that maybe I'd share just a little bit about me before we get started on the Training Managers to be Managers presentation this morning. I thought that perhaps letting you know a little bit about me would be helpful. I grew up in northern Colorado, and when I was very little, this is a picture of me as a very little girl. I don't know why I'm wearing what appears to be a picnic basket or a picnic table cover there, but that's what my mom put me in. But I thought I'd be a doctor at that time. And then as I got older, I thought perhaps I would be in the theater. And I was a stage manager, and I primarily worked behind stage, although in this picture I'm right there. I'm the queen in one of the productions that we had in high school. And really, I can tell you, at no time in my life did I think that I was going to be a gray-haired HR lady. That was just something I did not think I was going to be. So I did go to college, and I graduated, as Michael said, with a BS in Business Administration and with a management emphasis, and worked for State Farm Insurance for a while, and was in operations and human resources, both in management positions in those areas. And after a while, decided maybe I wanted to go back to what I had originally thought I was going to be and become a doctor. So I worked for an ambulance service. This is a picture of me on a motorcycle there. I don't actually ride motorcycles. It was a staged picture, but it was fun. And I worked on an ambulance for a while, and then became the HR director for that ambulance service. They realized I had HR management experience, and so they had me become their first HR director, and I built their HR department. They had 125 employees and no HR department. So I built that, and I even struggled with that experience. And I had a background, a formal education background, and then also a lot of experience through State Farm. I struggled with that HR component. and trying to make sure that I was doing everything exactly the way that I needed to do, and make sure that the managers that worked with me knew how to manage people. And so after years of that, I was promoted to VP of Operations, and then decided that I wanted to get back to really working with some small businesses and helping management be easier. And so I opened up Courtside Consulting, which is my business, and actually became the gray-haired HR lady. So I'm not sure how that all turned out, but there's the full circle of my past and what happened. I really started Courtside so that I could help businesses with HR and management challenges. Because as you know, sometimes employees can really be monsters, and they really can cause a lot of problems. And as business owners, we have an entire situation where we are running through the outback just like this gazelle. And we're running and we're running and worried about our business, we're worried about our revenue, we're worried about all the things that we need to worry about, but maybe not employees, and that's the tree in the outback. The problem is that when we start worrying about so many other things, that sometimes we forget about the employees, and they turn into big problems than what we ever imagined. I know that I hired employees thinking this was going to make my job easier, and actually it didn't. It didn't make it easier at all, it made it harder. So what I'm going to bring to you today are really the 5 secrets to management success. They're the things that I think help managers be better managers, and that's what we're going to walk through today. So the first secret to management success is really always being in hiring mode. You want to always be in hiring mode. Now, by doing that, you may be out and you may be having dinner, and your wait person may come up and say, how can I help you? And you may get to know them over the course of the dinner, and you may realize that that's somebody that you want to have potentially work for you. That's being in hiring mode all the time. Looking for opportunities to find those folks that are really going to resonate with your mission and help you achieve your goals because of the way that they interact with you, the way that they're going to interact with your customers. One caution I'm going to give you is don't make having a pulse the determining factor in hiring. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because a lot of times people get just too busy to interview, they get too busy to really look into somebody's background, and at that point they hire the wrong people. So let's think about the best ways to always be in hiring mode. You want to look for the qualities you need in the people around you. You want to actually have them exude those qualities you're talking to them, and you want to be able to pull those out of them as you're talking to them as well. You want to develop behavior-based questions around the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for your organization and for the position. And when you think about knowledge and abilities, you really are thinking about the three-legged stool that's going to make the employee successful. Knowledge is what they know. That's what they're going to bring with them in their head. It's what they know. The skills are what they can do. And with those skills, they have different levels of skills, of course, and different level of knowledge. So you need to think about the base levels of knowledge and skills that you actually need that person to have. You can train people on knowledge and skills. They should come with some base level, but you can actually train them and really help them to excel in your organization. Now, abilities, the third leg of that three-legged stool, is the tricky one. The abilities is really who that person is. Who are they generally? So if you have someone that you need to have standing up in front of an organization or in front of clients or in front of a large group of people, they may have the knowledge to talk about what they're talking about. They may have the skills to be able to do that. They may not have the ability to stand up in front of people and speak. And so those are the kinds of things you want to look at. What is their personality base, and what abilities do they have? And do those abilities, along with the knowledge and skills that they bring to the table, does that really help you in your workplace, in your goals, or with your goals? Developing behavior-based questions around the knowledge, skills, and abilities is very important as well. So you want to ask them about things that they've done in the past, and you want to listen to the answers about really, have they thought through in different situations? Have they thought through the answer and thought through the problem, and are they able to articulate that the best that they can? And as they articulate that, it's not necessarily the exact example that they're giving that you should be listening to, but you should be listening to how do they think through that process. What do they, are they using the resources that they can? Are they bringing things to the table and trying to solve the problem, or are they just handing a problem off to someone else? So as you develop those behavior-based questions around the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are necessary, you certainly want to get information from them that are going to be, and that information is going to be able to predict how they are going to move forward in your organization. The next thing you want to do when you're always in hiring mode is to establish set interview dates and build your what-if file. And what I mean by that is if you only interview when you have an opening, you're always behind the 8 ball. You're always going to be struggling with exactly what, you don't have any time. So you're going to be struggling with, what do? I don't have enough time. I'm working more because I'm trying to fill in for my employee that has been let go or who has left the organization. So you want to establish interview dates that are set within your plan of a week or a month to say, I'm always going to interview, and I'm going to put really good resumes into my what-if file. What if I lose this employee? What if I need to hire someone in addition? Maybe I'm growing my staff. So you're going to have that what-if file that you can establish. And let's talk a little bit about offers and thanks, but unfortunately no letters. Reject letters would be another way to say that. When you're in hiring mode, you need to be ready to offer someone a job if they're the right person for you, especially in this economy right now. The way that unemployment is looking in our state, in Colorado, and across the nation, that unemployment is low. And so the top candidates are going to be the first ones that are taken. So if you're always in hiring mode, then you need to have an offer letter that you can readily send out to somebody when you're going to extend a job offer to them. After you've gone through the interview process, after you've done reference checks and background checks and those kinds of things, you want to be able to offer them a job quickly. So those are the things you need to think about in offers. In those offer letters, you can talk about their pay, you can talk about any benefits you might be offering them, certainly talk about their job responsibilities and the things that they're going to do. The other side of that are all those people that may apply with you that you interview that you decide not to hire. Think about those folks as potential customers, or maybe they know potential customers for you. So you want to make sure that you're treating them well and that you're getting back to them. You would be surprised how many people I talk to on a daily basis that do not have a reject letter or a thanks for your application, we're looking at it, or any kind of contact from companies that they're responding to or companies that they're applying with. You should send something to them to let them know that you've received their application or their resume and you're looking at it, or that you've looked at it and you decided not to go with them, you decided to go a different direction, or even you interviewed them and decided to go a different direction. And those can just be canned responses that you can have available so you don't have to rewrite them every time you send them out, but you can just copy and paste them into an email and send those to the candidates. Again, it's just really goodwill and good PR for your company to respond because a lot of companies are not doing that. A couple other things just to help you stop hiring monsters. Let the candidates talk 80% of the time in the interview. You want to hear from them. You want to give them information and share that information with them, certainly about expectations, things that they're going to be doing in the job. You can share all of that information with them and then get information back from them. But let them talk about 80% of the time. If you're talking the majority of the time, you're not going to get to know them very well, and therefore you're not going to know if they have the right knowledge, skills, and abilities to work within your organization. The other thing is ask specific situational questions or ask for specific examples of, tell me a time when, describe a situation where, and ask them for those specific examples. What I find a lot is when I talk to people and I'm interviewing them and I ask them for a specific example of a time when they were unable to meet a customer's needs, for example. they usually give me a philosophical answer. They usually say, well, if I'm unable to meet a customer's needs, then I do A, B, and C. And what I want you to do is say, that's great. Can you give me an example of when you put that to practice? So go back to them and try to get specific examples from them. Even if that specific example is not going to be able to be directly translated to what you do, for example. So they may be talking about working in a retail store, and you may have a service industry that you're providing service, and so there may not be direct translation because you haven't done what you're asking them to do, or they haven't fulfilled responsibilities based on the position you're interviewing them for. But what you want to listen for is, how do they think? Are they trying to solve problems on their own? Are they using the resources that are there, or are they just handing that problem off to a manager or to a coworker? So really listen to their answers. Listen to what they're saying, not necessarily the exact examples that they're giving. Really, how are they thinking through that process? The second secret is continually talking about your expectations. What I mean by that is, in the interview, in the job offer, through orientation and training programs, through check-ins, and we'll talk about that in a minute, through all of those things, I want you to continually talk about what you're expecting. If you bring somebody in for an abbreviated interview because you're so busy that you don't have time to really interview anyone, and you bring them in for an interview, and you just say, it's going to be a receptionist job, and that's what we're doing, then you might miss telling them the expectations that that receptionist job is going to be frontline for any customer complaints that come away. So customers are going to come in, and if they have a complaint, that receptionist is going to be the first person that person's going to see, and they're not going to be happy. And so someone's going to come into the job and hear a receptionist and think, okay, I'm going to answer the phone and greet guests and get coffee, I get it. And then suddenly they're getting yelled at. And so those expectations weren't actually told to that individual. Here's another example. I talked to somebody over the last couple of days who has people who actually are on call in the middle of the night. They're victim advocates, and they're on call in the middle of the night. A lot of people want to be victim advocates until they realize that they could get called at 2 or 3 in the morning, which, as this person told me, that's the typical time that victim advocates are called. And so what I told her to do was mention that in the interview. Mention that in the job offer. Mention that in all the orientation and training so that this individual understands those expectations up front. Don't be afraid to share those expectations in the interview process or all throughout their employment. It really, really helps when we start talking about coaching those employees or disciplining those employees. If they know those expectations up front, that's going to be more helpful to you down the road. The other thing to keep in mind is really build expectations with employees. Have that basic outline done, but ask the employee for input as they're working. When you go back to have a check-in with them and just say, hey, how's it going and what's happening, and you have everything you need to do your job, we got you a new chair, how's that working out for you? We got you a new software program, how is that working out for you? Maybe we have a new vehicle that you're in, that you're driving to different homes to install things. How is that vehicle working out for you? Having any problems with it? And develop that. But at that time, you can also start saying, okay, we talked to you about the expectations in the interview process. We talked about that, as we extended the job offer to you. We talked about that in the orientation and training. How did we do? Did we represent our expectations well? We talked to you about the things that you needed, and are we representing them fairly, or is there something else that we need to talk about either now or with new hires that we're going to be bringing on in your position? That other duties as assigned is usually something that we talk that is on job descriptions, and everybody kind of laughs at that because it's like, yeah, you do whatever you need to do, especially in small business. In small business, we don't say, okay, you're only going to be responsible for customer service, or you're only going to be responsible for installation, or you're only going to be responsible for answering the phones, because you're going to do all of those things. And in addition, you're also going to maybe clean the bathrooms and throw away the trash and do all of those things. So you want to work with the employee on the expectations of what those other duties as assigned may be, and get them comfortable that even though the job descriptions may say items 1 through 10, there are other items that they may have to do, and those might include taking out their own trash or dusting or doing some other things. So make sure that you're having those conversations with them so that they understand that's part of the expectation too. It's all about open communication. It's all about working with your employees to make sure that they know they can talk to you about problems and you can talk to them, and building that rapport back and forth to get them so that they're comfortable with what you need and what the organization needs and how their job and the expectations that you have for them, how all of those things fit into the company goals. Share the company goals with them. Let them know how important they are toward those company goals, and that really helps with the expectations too. They feel as though they will be able to communicate with you better, but it's also very transparent, and that will help you down the road. So let's talk about problem behavior. Many people have a tendency to bury their head in the sand when they have a problem employee. And the third tip to being a great manager is to deal with problem behavior now. You want to deal with it when it's small. Somebody comes in late today, you may think, I'm not going to worry about that. And then they come in late tomorrow and you're thinking, oh, I should probably talk to them because that's 2 days in a row. And soon it's 15 days in a row, and you haven't really said anything to them. So you need to have a conversation with them when it's a small problem, not just when it's a big one, because it can get big. So it's okay for you to go over and say, hey, I noticed you came in late today. Is everything okay? That's non-threatening. That's letting them know that you think about them, but it's also telling them that you noticed that they came in late. And so those problems are important to talk about when they're very, very tiny. Nip them in the bud, so to speak. How you communicate with them is really important as well. Talking to them about the problem and having that continual open communication with them is really, really a key factor in making that relationship a success. So we're going to have some more detail later in the presentation on having difficult conversations with employees, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that as well. But the communication style in dealing with behavior problems, even just an everyday conversation with your employees, how you talk to them is vitally important to your success as an organization and as a manager. Progressive discipline versus progressive frustration. This is one of my favorites. When I usually get a phone call as an HR consultant, I have clients that call me and say, okay, that's it, I'm done. I want to fire this person, and so I've got to fire them now. And being in HR, I always ask that question. It gets people upset. If you've been in a corporate environment, then you know that HR is going to ask the question of, where's the documentation? Do you have any documentation? And really what happens is when you don't have any documentation, you become progressively frustrated. So that person came in late today, you didn't say anything. They came in late, the next day you didn't say anything. They came in late the next day, you didn't say anything. And maybe after day 14 or 15, you're ready to fire them because they continually come in late. But you didn't document it, and you didn't say anything to them. So they may think that's the new norm. Okay, well, I was supposed to be here at 8, but when I come in at 8:30, nobody says anything, so maybe it's not that big a deal. What you want to do is do progressive discipline where you talk to them and do awareness counseling first and just say, all right, what's going on? Are you okay? Is everything okay? I noticed you came in late today. And then if they come in late again, you can sit down with them and say, hey, I know we talked yesterday and you said everything was okay and it was kind of an anomaly that you came in late, but now I'm seeing more of a pattern, so I need to give you a verbal warning. And this verbal warning is that, we don't have to talk about this again if you just come here on time. Let me tell you why it's important that you come in on time. Because when you come in on time, you're putting together the route that everybody's going to drive or the report that everybody's going to use the rest of the day. And if that's not ready by 8:30 in the morning, then the rest of the team has no work to do. They're sitting around waiting for you to finish that report or finishing the route. So I need you to get that done and get it out by 8:30 so that the rest of the team has something to do. So that is really a verbal warning of explaining why they need to do it. If they continue on the problem, progressive discipline then moves into a written warning. and maybe another written warning, and maybe a final written warning before you suspend or terminate someone. So it's progressively more formalized discipline is what progressive discipline is, versus not doing anything and just getting more frustrated. And documentation is always important. Documenting that you did an awareness counseling session, just making a note to yourself and putting it in their file. Maybe a verbal warning, the same thing. Okay, I gave Susie a verbal warning on this date. She said she's not, not normally late, just having some car trouble this week. Whatever that looks like, and put that in the file. And that can be thrown away, frankly. You don't have to keep that documentation if Susie's never late again. But if she's continually late, then you want to have that documentation. So in a formal write-up, you can actually say, I visited with you on this date and just said, I noticed you came in late, and then we had a verbal warning on this date, and now we're doing a written warning because you haven't changed your behavior. So documentation can be informal, more of a little note to yourself, or it can be formal where there's a memo and there's expectations that are spelled out and time frames that are spelled out, and the bottom line is they need to correct their behavior or further disciplinary action or termination could result. So it just progressively gets more and more formal. Eat the frog first is something that Mark Twain said many, many years ago. You want to confront that poor behavior early, review the expectations and timelines, really follow the progressive discipline cycle when you can, and then keep that communication open. Remain calm always. I have a son, and my son has a tendency to get excited about things. And sometimes we make a bigger deal out of little problems. I don't know if you've experienced that with kids or employees or spouses, whatever that might be. But people have a tendency to make things a little bit bigger deal than they need to be. And I found a video that helps describe that a little bit.
Already late. Somebody will come. Anybody out there? Do you have a phone? No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on the escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me. Well, enough left to do. Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second. He said he can fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. Said he can fix it.
What I think about when I see that is what my son said to me when I showed him this video. And he was pretty young when he first saw it, and he looked at me and he said, I don't get it. Can't they just walk up the stairs? And I think that's exactly what happens. Sometimes we get stuck on an escalator when all we need to do is walk up the stairs. Either our employees are stuck on that escalator or we as managers are stuck on that escalator. The problem can come into play when you're stuck on an elevator. When you're actually stuck on an elevator, you need help to get out of there. You can't just push another button and go to a different floor. You need some assistance to get out of the elevator. But when you're stuck on an escalator, you can get yourself out of that problem. And so that's one reason to remain calm. Most of the problems that we experience as managers have to be, we are stuck on an escalator, not an elevator. So if you remain calm, that is key. Don't escalate the situation. Now, Again, back to kids. When you have kids that are really upset and they're crying, if you start yelling at them, they're going to cry more. They're going to escalate their emotion, and that's what happens with employees too. We're just grown-up kids, really. And so what happens is if we start yelling at an employee, they're just going to get defensive, they're going to get upset about it, they're going to start yelling, and either they're yelling because they're embarrassed about the problem that they've caused, or they just are feeling defensive because of the way that you're approaching them. Again, communication helps. So don't escalate the situation, go ahead and remain calm. Counting to 10 still applies. We've always heard, all right, just count to 10 before you react. That still applies. And I'm reminded of a story. My grandfather, we had a family furniture store for many, many years as I was growing up. And my grandfather, when he used to get upset about something, either something went wrong with an order or maybe a customer was unhappy and the salesperson wasn't helping them, whatever that might be, my grandfather, when he was ready to blow up and he knew he was going to have a bad response to something, would say, let me think about that and get back to you. And that one little phrase has always stuck in my head, because if I'm not ready to calmly react to the situation, I'm not talking about an emergency situation, but I'm talking about being calm in a situation where someone's upset. Just say, you know what, let me think about this and let me get back to you, and then get back to them. But it gives you a little bit of time to calm down and to respond in a calm manner. The other thing that I think is important is to go ahead and expect the unexpected. You never know what's going to happen. I worked on the ambulance for a few months before I became the HR director, and we never knew what the next call was or what was going to happen. But I knew that if I got to a scene, I had to remain calm because the emotions were so high around me. I was seeing people, on their worst day, and so I had to remain calm. And I had to expect that something else was going to go wrong. Maybe a piece of equipment was going to break or whatever. In business, it's the same way. We have to expect that maybe something won't work. For example, this morning when I started the presentation, had a little glitch with the technology. That happens. You just move on. Just move through those things and expect the unexpected. So the bottom line is be a duck. When you're looking at a duck in a lake, they look like they're just swimming so gracefully and there's no problem. But if you were to go underwater with some goggles and look at them, their feet are going about 90 miles an hour. So you want to be a duck. You want to be proactive. You want to create a calm working environment. Don't always be disheveled. Don't always be in a hurry. Create that calm environment for your employees. And then obviously consistently handle any crisis that might occur. And use common sense. Unfortunately, common sense is not always present in any situation in life. So getting your common sense tuned in and making sure that that's on when you're at work is so vitally important. The next tip that I have is rules are for when thinking stops. I saw this on a billboard several years ago, and it's just always stuck in my head. When we have rules, right, we have to have rules when thinking stops, but we don't always have to have rules if just one person is the problem. Don't write a policy for one employee. If one employee is not wearing the appropriate attire, or one employee is not maybe answering the phone the way that you want them to, or one employee is not dealing with your customers the way you want them to, don't write a policy for that one employee. You want to have an opportunity to talk to that one employee because the other employees know what they're doing. They're doing exactly what you want them to. So you've got to pull that other employee in and have a difficult conversation with them. And I'm gonna segue here a little bit with difficult conversations. I've come up with 5 tips for difficult conversations that I wanted to share with you today. The first thing you want to do when you're having a difficult conversation with somebody is plan. You really want to plan for that conversation. When are you going to have it? Where are you going to have it? What kind of security might you need? If you're having for example, a discipline conversation with someone, make sure that you have access to the door, that you can get out if they get upset. And discipline and terminations are a completely different topic that we'll save for maybe another day. But you certainly want to plan for those conversations. And then you need to admit that it's going to be a difficult conversation. So if you've got an employee that is not treating your customers the way that you want them to, and you've got to sit down and have a difficult conversation with them, and you planned out the points that you want to bring up to them, then you want to say, hey, this is going to be a difficult conversation. You know, it's going to be tough today. We need to talk about the way that you're treating customers, and tell them, you know, the third point is just tell them what you need to tell them. Just talk to them. Just say, this is what's going on, this is my perception, this is what I'm seeing, you know, help me understand what's happening here. Is there a bigger picture? Have a dialogue back and forth with them. And ask for questions. You know, that's the other thing you can do, is always ask them for questions. And then the last tip on that, on difficult conversations, is actually documenting the conversation. So when you make time for difficult conversations, you've got to walk through some steps to do that, and it's uncomfortable. And I want you to feel okay with that. It's okay to say, wow, I've got to have a difficult conversation with you. I'm a little uncomfortable about it. I've got to talk to you about a problem. When we owned our furniture store, I grew up there, and I knew all the people that were there, and they literally knew me from when I was born. And suddenly, when I got into college, I was their assistant manager, and so I was their boss. And I had to have difficult conversations with them. You may have a similar situation where you're working within a family business, or you're working alongside people that you used to, you're managing people that you used to work alongside. And so it's difficult to have those conversations. It's okay to tell them that. And it's okay to sit down and talk to them and say, I know this is a little uncomfortable. We've got to talk this through. I really want to find out what happened, and I want to make sure that it won't happen again. If thinking does stop on a grand level, then write a policy. So if everybody's wearing the wrong thing, or everyone's not answering the phone right, or everyone's not, you know, coming in on time, or all of those things, what you want to do is you want to write a policy so everybody understands it, and then roll it out to them and say, hey, I'm noticing that we're not wearing the right attire, or we're not answering the phone the way that I want them to. So let me walk you through that. Let me help you with that information so that we make sure that we're all on the same page. And then be consistent with the folks that you're talking to. So you don't want to implement policies and then not uphold them. A lot of times if you have an employee handbook and you have several policies, and maybe one policy you're thinking, I just don't care about that policy anymore. I'm not going to make my employees, you know, wear that shirt anymore. They can wear whatever they want. Then remove that from your handbook. Because if you have a policy that you're not really being consistent with and you're not upholding, sometimes that can negate other policies in your handbook. So be sure and update your handbook on a regular basis, and just be consistent with how you implement those policies. So again, some policies are helpful if more than one employee is involved, or maybe there's more than one instance of a situation. It may have a high level of impact on the organization. So you want to make sure that in that high level of impact, if you're addressing those problems and you're working through with your employees, and then always use common sense. If a policy makes sense, then make sure that you're implementing it and you're consistently holding them to that. If a policy doesn't make sense, then think about rewriting it or changing it or eliminating it. So use common sense. You can use the employees and talk to them about it as well. So just to summarize, the 5 secrets to managing success: always be in hiring mode, always look for those people that can help you out, look for the people that really embody the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to be successful within the organization. Once you find those people, continually talk about expectations. Continually visit with them about what you're expecting, how you want them to move forward, and continue to talk to them. If they're not making those, they're not meeting those expectations, then deal with the problem behavior now. Visit with them, talk to them, tell them it's a difficult conversation, explain what your expectations are, tell them how they're not meeting them, set timelines, and get them back on track. It is much cheaper for you. It is more economical for you to keep an employee that's already trained than to go out, try to find a new one, and train them. And I'm sure you know that, but just as a reminder, if you can correct that behavior and get them right back on course, that's going to help you out financially, as well as just that stability and institutional knowledge that they maintain. Remain calm always. I think that says it itself. Just remain calm. Be sure to keep yourself calm and yourself centered as the manager so that if the employees are upset, you can deal with them. One point to that maybe I didn't bring up, in my EMT training, the first thing that they taught us in EMT school was take care of yourself first, which I thought, you know, wow, that's the first thing you're going to teach me. But if I didn't take care of myself as an EMT, then I couldn't take care of my patients. And so I'm going to say that to you as well. Starting a business and building a business and building a brand is difficult. I've done it for the last 8 years. And I know that in those time periods of building, working, and trying to get my brand built and doing all of those things, that I've had some struggles. And I haven't taken care of myself first. And that's when I got sick and I wasn't able to do the things that I needed to do. So take care of yourself. Make sure that you're giving yourself breaks. Make sure you're drinking water and doing healthy eating and those types of things as well. That will help you remain calm, and it'll help you stay centered so that your employees can then help, you know, can come to you for help. And then the last one is rules are for when thinking stops. So don't just set up a rule if you're having problems with one employee. Go ahead and talk to that employee. If it's a massive shift, if everybody's doing something that you need to change, then maybe it is time for a policy. It may just be time to sit everybody down and have a difficult conversation. So use your common sense with that. But rules are for when thinking stops. One thing before I go, and that's just a little bit about what I do. I am a national speaker and I'm an author. I have a book available on Amazon that you can check out. It's called Enjoy the Ride, What My Bike Taught Me About Managing People. And then I also help businesses build HR processes that make sense for them and help them implement them. And then I'm available on an as-needed basis if they need some help. And I work with larger corporations with that HR and operations relationship. Sometimes HR and operations don't talk to each other, and so I actually help bridge that gap and help that communication. So if you're interested in learning more about what I do, please visit my website, and that's at www.courtsidehr.com. So thank you again so much for letting me present to you this morning. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Shannon for any Q&As that may have come in. Shannon?
I'm not Shannon, but I'm Michael. Maybe I'll do.
Well, hi, Michael. You will do. Thank you.
Good job, Courtney. I enjoyed your webinar immensely. We hope that the rest of you in the audience found the information informative. We will now move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. Please feel free to continue and enter your questions into the chat log. And Shannon, hopefully, will tell us what questions we have queued up for Courtney to answer.
Yes, thank you so much. So, Courtney, thank you again. And can you give us some examples of good interview questions to get the candidates talking?
Oh, yeah, what a great question. I can. So here's how I start to get them to talk, because everybody can talk about themselves. Everybody feels comfortable talking about themselves. But when you ask that typical question, tell me about yourself, you never know what you're going to get. They could talk for 15 minutes. So what I do is when I start the interview, I talk about the position, I talk about the company, I talk about some of the expectations that are necessary that come with that job. And then I say to people, hey, I've had a chance to look at your resume, but this is just a piece of paper. Can you bring this to life for me and highlight those areas that would really fit into this organization and the job as I've explained it to you? So it gives them an opportunity to really highlight the areas that they think are going to help you meet your expectations and help the organization meet their goals. The other thing is, and that really gets them started on talking. The other thing to think about is how you ask the questions. So people don't like to interview with me, honestly, because they haven't been able to prepare for some of the questions that I ask them. I tend to have a negative spin on my questions. And what I mean by that is, instead of saying, hey, give me your best customer service experience that you can share with me, that you've had an interaction with a customer and it's the best one that you've had. Instead of asking that, I have a tendency to ask things like, tell me when you were unable to meet the needs of a customer. Another one might be, tell me when you were part of a team and the team was unable to achieve the goal. Because what I want to do is I want to get them, one, I don't want to know what they prepared in the car. I want them to think on their feet. I want them to be able to have a conversation with me when they don't know what I'm going to ask them. And two, I want to know how their thought process works. So if they give me a time and they say, well, if I can't meet a customer's needs, I think I mentioned this in the webinar, if I can't meet a customer's needs, then this is what I'm going to do, A, B, and C. Then I push back and I say, that's great. When did you apply that? Give me a specific example of when you put that practice to, put that philosophy to practice, put it to work. What happened? And I push back to get that specific example. Again, I'm looking for how are they thinking. So you want to ask some questions that pull information from the candidate about specific examples of things that they've already done. And then, again, try to think of, okay, I don't want to ask them about their strengths and weaknesses. I want to find out what their strengths and weaknesses are through some of my questions. So how can I do that? Okay, well, I want to know if they have good time management skills. So I'm going to ask them about a specific time when they had 3 priorities that were due right now. How did they decide that they were going to get these 3 things done? What steps did they take to get those 3 things done within the deadline? And ask them for specific examples of those things.
Perfect. Okay, a bunch of questions are actually coming in. So the next question is, I heard you were one of the speakers at the Leadership Summit this year. Will you be there next year, and would you recommend I attend?
Well, I would love to have you attend. And actually, I just was visiting with Shannon and Michael about that before the webinar started. I am hoping to be there, and so I'll be looking into that to see if that's possible. But I am hoping to be there. So please come. Okay. Please come and talk to me. And if you have anybody who's listening, if you have a topic that's related to HR and management that you think might be helpful to you at that conference, let me know.
Perfect. Okay, here's the next one. We are a small business and have a contract employee who would like to be hired as a full-time employee. There are some performance issues and trust issues between this contractor and the newly appointed president. The question ends there, but I think that they're probably asking for some advice in that case.
Sure. Okay, couple of situations there. You're dealing with a contractor, which is a 1099 worker, who really isn't in the control of the organization. So if somebody hires a independent contractor, a 1099 worker, and they come in and they really have the run of the show, to be honest with you. They may have some deadlines that you're getting them. They may have some deliverables that they need to produce, but they really have the run of the show. When they're an employee, you have much more control over them. So you can actually say, okay, I want you here from this time to this time. I want you to wear these things. This is exactly how I want you to do the work. This is when I want you to do the work. This is where I want you to do the work. So as an employee, you have much more control over that worker than as an independent contractor. So that's a good thing. Something to keep in mind, though, is when you have a worker who's been a 1099 worker who would get a 1099 form at the end of the year, and then you bring them on as an employee in that same year, there can be a little blip on the IRS screen that says, okay, we have somebody who worked for the organization, they were a 1099 worker, and now they get a W-2, so now they're an employee. Should they have been an employee all along? So that's something to consider, and that's something that I work with clients all the time is, okay, how do you make that decision? And I would just say, if you feel that, one, you want to hire them on and you want them to be an employee, the tax consequences or whatever that looks like, maybe that isn't a consideration for you. But it's always something to maybe think about and say, okay, I really want them to be an employee, and maybe they should have been an employee all along, but I'm going to go ahead and correct that situation right now, and I'm going to make them an employee. So to just kind of summarize that, one, employees, you're going to get way more control over that person than an independent contractor. And just one other thing, look at the performance issues and see if that control will actually help with those performance issues. If not, don't bring on somebody you know is going to be a headache. If they're not the right person, you can find somebody who has the knowledge, skills, and abilities you need. So don't bring on somebody just because you're familiar with them if you know that they're going to cause some headaches. But if it's just a control thing where, wow, we need to have them here at a certain time and they're not here, when you make them an employee, you can get that done.
Perfect. And actually, Courtney, I didn't want to interrupt, but I just realized there was a second follow-up part to that, and
Okay.
I think you've addressed some of it, but it's the owner of the business suggests if we hire this person, they will start meeting the expectations, but the president suggests that the contractor needs to meet those expectations prior to being hired. So what is your opinion on that portion of it?
Well, not knowing the whole situation and not wanting to take sides with what's the owner and the president, I think what I'd say is sit down and really make a list of where that person is not meeting the expectations. And then look at that and say, okay, is that because as an independent contractor, maybe they have other contracts, maybe they have other things going on, maybe we're not giving them all the information so they're not meeting those expectations. You know, what is the why behind them not meeting those expectations, and see if becoming an employee will help them meet that. But the other thing is, I think it's the president that said he or she should meet those expectations before you bring them on as an employee. I understand that. I think the president is concerned that if this worker is not meeting expectations now, bringing them on as an employee may just be bringing on a headache, because then you've got, you know, all these other things. You've got all this investment that you're putting into that employee, maybe benefits, time off, those kinds of things, as well as training costs. And so, you know, you want to make sure that you're hiring the right person. So figure out what they're doing, determine if those things can be helped by more control from an employee standpoint, and then really look at the knowledge, skills, and abilities of this independent contractor and make sure they match up with a position.
Okay, perfect. So another one that I have here, and it's a little bit of a long one, it's kind of two parts, but I'll just give all of it to you, and you can kind of take it as you'd like.
Okay.
So I have to be honest that so much of this sounds like I have to coddle the employees. I am fair and reasonable, but if someone comes in late, I'm wondering why I have to be so nice. You say kind of non-threatening. Why can't I tell them that coming in late could cost them their job?
You can. You absolutely can. It's really about the kind of culture that you're creating within your organization. So it's okay to sit down with somebody and say, hey, you came in late today. I don't know what's going on, but if you continue to come in late, you can lose your job. That's fine. If that's, you know, how you would communicate to that employee, that's fine. What I'm suggesting, and just looking at some HR best practices, is trying to build the rapport with the employee so that the employee responds better to discipline or corrective situations. But you know what? There are workers that don't respond to niceness. There are workers that the only thing that they're going to do is if you get in their face. And so in those situations, I've had to get in employees' faces and say, knock it off. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. Change it. You know, I'm done. That happens sometimes. So you are the best person to know about how your employees are going to respond to how you talk to them. Some will respond with the nice stuff and the progressive discipline warnings. Others, you need to tell them right off, this has got to stop right now. I'm not putting up with this anymore. And it really depends on the personality of the employee. So use that. It's a tool in your toolbox, and use the appropriate tool with the employee.
Okay, perfect. We have some more coming in still. So here's another one. Always being in hiring mode sounds good, but I only have 4 employees, and to always be interviewing takes a lot of time. Is this really necessary, especially since I am not always ready to take on a new person?
Yeah, so let's talk about what I mean by always being in hiring mode. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to interview every week. But what I would do is just say, you know, I'm out to dinner and the waiter or waitress comes up and says, hey, can I help you? And I have a good exchange with them. I did this in Utah all the time when I recruited for State Farm. And I'd have a great exchange with that wait staff. And so I'd say, you know, what are you trying to do? Do you want to work here? Are you trying to own a restaurant? You know, are you going to school? What's your end goal? And I'd start that conversation with them. And if they were somebody that had the knowledge, skills, and abilities that I might want, I would give them my business card and tell them to reach out to me. So that's kind of one of the ways to always be in hiring mode. If you find somebody that you think is good that might fit in your organization, you know, give them your business card and tell them you'd love to talk to them a little bit more. When I worked at the ambulance service, we would hire lots of EMTs and paramedics as we grew. And we would have Mondays. One Monday would be interview day, and the next Monday would be orientation and training, and then the following Monday would be interview day. And we did that continually throughout an entire summer. I don't think with 4 employees you probably need to do that. But here's the problem. If you don't have anybody in your what-if file, if you don't have anybody kind of just sitting there for you to reach out to if somebody leaves, and you lose 1 or 2 people, that's 25 to 50% of your workforce. So then all of a sudden you're picking up that work, and your other employees are picking up that work, and you don't really have time to interview. So then the whole snowball starts happening. You say, I've got to interview for 2 people. I'm going to have 6 interviews. I'm going to do 20 minutes apiece. I'm going to interview them. And suddenly you're just hiring because somebody has a pulse. So always being in interview mode helps you find people in a situation that isn't an emergency, that you don't necessarily need them now, but you've got maybe some files there that you could call them and say, hey, I know we talked 6 months ago. I happen to have an opening. I was wondering if you're still available and come in to talk to me. So it just allows you to do it a little bit more over time rather than in emergency mode.
Okay, perfect. Another question here is, do you recommend conducting employee profile or predictive index studies on potential candidates prior to an interview?
Oh, see, this is where I start to deviate from some of my HR counterparts. It depends on the study. There are a lot of people that really like profile studies like DISC or Myers-Briggs. There are many, the color wheel, there are many out there. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. If you're going to use something like that, I would use it as one piece of the evaluation or one piece of the interview process. I would not use it as a end-all, be-all kind of situation where, nope, I don't want an ENTJ, I want a, whatever. I would look at that as one piece.
Okay.
And then make sure that what you're doing is validated for the position that you're doing it for. So if you're doing a personality test or you're coming up with some questions on your own and having them fill something out, make sure that that works for the particular position you're interviewing for.
Okay, perfect. And the next question that I have here is, you say not to make policy for one person, but say it is more like 8 out of 50 employees not doing something correctly. What is the break even when you should look at changing or adding a new policy?
I think that's when you look at the impact on the organization. So let's say that you have, 8 of 50 employees, what is that? That's almost 20%. Then I would probably start thinking, wow, maybe we need this. If all of those 8 are somehow related, they're all in the same department, they're all in the same unit, they're all under the same manager, something like that, then I would look at those similarities to see if maybe there's another problem. For example, sometimes employees act up and it's really not the employee's fault, it's a supervisor's fault. So as a business owner, we need to look at, is the supervisor causing this or the employees? In that situation with 8 of 50, I would think about putting a policy down, but it would depend on the situation. What are those 8 people doing, that kind of thing.
Okay. I have somebody here who is stating that in their experience, niceness has turned into being taken advantage of. Is that something that you'd want to kind of cover?
Yeah. Yes, and that goes back to, I just want to tell this guy that if he doesn't come in on time, I'm going to fire him. It goes back to that question. Niceness can be taken advantage of. But I have to say, in my 30-plus years of doing management and HR, from a frontline supervisor all the way up to a VP level, I start out nice, but I don't stay nice if they continue to behave poorly. There have been situations where I've been sitting in meetings with employees who start yelling and screaming. They're suspended. I don't even wait to see what comes out of their mouth next. I automatically suspend them and tell them that I'll call them the next day to let them know what the next step is. So you have to know that fine line between I can be nice in this situation to absolutely not, I'm not putting up with that. That's done. You're either suspended or terminated or whatever. So there is a line. If you can be nice, it's what do I want to say? It's nice to be nice, but there are situations where you can't. Sometimes you have to terminate or suspend somebody for their actions.
Got it. Perfect. Well, the last one is, I think, just more feedback for you, Courtney, but I wanted to share it. So thank you so much for the webinar. You did a great job, and this was very informative. I loved Myers-Briggs for informational purposes. It does help to allow for growth and development for others that were curious on the profiling question. And that was the last entry in our question log. So I'll turn it back to Michael, Courtney, unless you have anything else to add.
No, I just want to say thank you so much for letting me speak this morning, and I hope to speak with your group in the future.
Perfect, thank you. Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Shannon. I'd like to encourage everyone to keep the conversation going. All executive management professionals are invited to attend ESX next week, June 24th through the 26th in Baltimore. Attendees can expect a very impressive lineup of keynote speakers and high-quality content that will be delivered in the seminars, plus an expo floor brimming with new technology and solutions. For more information, please visit www.esxweb.com. Finally, I'd like to remind everyone that a recording of the webinar and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be available in our EMP resource library at esaweb.org. If you'd like to receive CEUs for this webinar, please contact Shannon Murphy directly at shannon.murphy@esaweb.org. And thank you very much for participating. We appreciate your time and hope you found the content useful. Enjoy the rest of your day.